Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. We've got a really interesting conversation and a lot to talk about on both sides of the fence. It's all about making cold calls. Are we supposed to be making cold calls? Should it never be a cold call? How is it appropriate? How is it used? And we've got one of the leading experts on this, right? We've got Mike Vannoy here. Mike, you're not only the CMO of Asure Software, you've actually run sales for $1 billion company before, 700 reps. So I know you've got a lot of points of view on this, no doubt about it. But you're also, just in terms of where the market is going and the latest trends, you're also on the board of a company that's all about sales enablement through AI.
That's right.
So I'd love to hear more. And we're going to talk specifically today. The topic is myth or truth. Never make a B2B cold call. Is that what we should be thinking about? But before we start that, I'd love to just hear a little bit more from you on some of your background and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, sure. I grew up in an entrepreneurial home. As a young man, I thought only suckers worked for other people. I thought my tour in corporate America was going to be short, and then I'd do my own thing. I find myself in and out of corporate America. Had a really good run at a big company. Ended up leading sales for $1 billion company. Ran my own marketing agency for 12 years. B2B. Primarily content creation, demand generation, in some sales outsourcing. Find myself back in corporate America, but also sitting the boards of companies and fractional ownership of other small businesses. So kind of always trying to push the envelope, what we can do with this intersection of people, process, and technology in the world of sales and marketing. And probably never been a cooler time to be alive with the advent of AI and how things are starting to change. But really, I think we're on the precipice of a massive change.
Well, part of what we want to talk about is your point of view of what that change is and where you see that going. But right away, I mean, you oversaw 700 reps, right? $1 billion sales company. So if you wouldn't mind just starting out with defining cold calls, in what you think that is and what's appropriate, and drawing on your background as a CMO and head of sales. So I'd love to start there if we could.
Yeah, you know what? I think the term cold calling probably unfairly has a bad name. If I'm a sales rep and I'm told I got a cold call, I mean, that sounds like a terrible thing, right? Who wants to do that? I think but I think it's a bad thing because it implies this binary nature. Either it's hot or it's cold. And that's just not how buyers behave. That's not how the companies they work for behave. That's not how a marketplace behaves. It's all shades of gray, right? I mean, you could be at a large enterprise sale, and maybe you're cold called because you got a person you've not talked to before that navigates you through a process. And it's a little bit like the game of chutes and ladders. You climb up a few ladders and all of a sudden there's some turnover and you're back down to where you started. You climb back up and maybe your sponsor got fired and now you're on hold for 3 months as they backfill that person. I mean, there's hot periods and cold periods in a single sales cycle. If I think about a brand matrix, maybe my x-axis is they've never heard of me, and my other end of that axis is they know all about me. Well, that's awareness.
Yeah.
And then the y-axis perhaps is I have a really great reputation, but I could have a terrible reputation, right? So you could have a call that's cold to me. They've never met me, but maybe I work for a brand that they've heard of. If I'm a brand new SDR calling for on the heels of a Super Bowl ad, it might be cold to me, but it might be a kind of a warmish kind of a call, right? It could be a warm call that they know all about me, but my reputation is terrible. Cold to me, warm to the company, but they hate the company because it's a bad reputation. I just don't like the binary nature of it's a cold call versus it's a hot call. I think if you have a big sales organization, good penetration, you've been in the market for I don't know, a decade or more, chances are, if you've been doing some things right, everybody's probably heard of you, at least the company. So maybe it's not so cold to the rep. If you're starting up a new company, I would never want a rep to quote unquote cold call. I would want to feed them through some marketing leads because you can spin up something in marketing quite inexpensively, at least something, right? And so you could probably fill a rep's calendar with just marketing fed. But as you get market saturation, maybe there's only X number of businesses that exist in your ICP and a geography for a rep, that maybe there's more sales bandwidth than there is MQLs. And you, of course, feed them with MQLs, but you're leaving money on the table if they're not doing some quote unquote cold calling. So I just think you got to look at it a little more nuanced than do or don't cold call.
Which makes perfect sense. With the goal, or you tell me what your perspective, having, overseen both sides of the fence here, the goal is to be known more than not known, right? To have some positive association with our brand, our expertise, what we do, right? So, in terms of kind of the job, of marketing and then relating with sales,
Yeah.
you know, where does that balance come, right? When you oversaw 700 reps, how heavily were you relying on marketing, or how much were you talking to your reps about you can't just rely on the MQLs, right? You got to be drumming up some of your own business. Like, where does the balance for that come in your mind?
Yeah, and again, and forgive me, I might be a little argumentative. I almost take issue of the framing of the question, balance implying that there's some teeter totter that needs balancing. If I'm a rep that I'm being like, if I'm an inside sales rep, I'm at a call center, and I got a headset duct taped to me, to my head, and I'm just working automated cadences all day long, and leads are being fed to me, then content is really, really important for marketing, because it probably helps to acquire through maybe SEO or a paid search campaign, and it nurtured this prospect to a certain point, to the point that it got served up to me. If I'm a grown up territory rep working in the field, I mean, how effective am I going to be? Hey, Steve, you wanna meet with me so I can try selling you something? Versus, hey, Steve, we just completed our 2024 benchmark survey where we compared when the growth rate of 1,000 businesses, blah blah blah. That's all of a sudden a meeting maybe you want to have. So it's a cold call, but I'm leveraging the marketing content. So I don't buy into the fact that there should be this, here's marketing, here's sales, I flip it over the fence, one to the other, anything. You shouldn't, as a marketer, you shouldn't be creating content. You might create content that is primarily designed for marketing only, but your content, if you're creating content that maps to the buyer's journey and to the buyer persona, I mean, there's not a reason on earth that content shouldn't also serve as a companion, a tool, a guide, a resource for sales reps. So, in my mind, they're never separate. In fact, in most B2B, once you get out of micro SMB, they just go hand in glove together.
Yeah, Forrester, they talk about that content is the foundation, right, for an ABM motion. And so, especially in today's world, right, we've got this something that's new that wasn't happening just a few years ago, is this real desire for a self-service B2B buyer journey, right? Where they're
Yeah.
waiting longer and longer to want to talk to us. They're consuming more content to
Yeah.
make their decisions. And so it's incumbent upon us, collectively as an organization, how do we create those conversations earlier in the buyer's journey rather than be regulated to the end? And a lot of that is going to be through content, right? And like you said, like that survey, right? What is your thought on kind of the role that marketing and sales plays together and how that has changed with the advent of this kind of a self-service buyer's journey?
Yeah, I think it's more important than ever to do this, mapping a buyer's journey, creating content to the personas. That was I mean, that's kind of best practice of 15 pushing 20 years ago. So it's not like it was ever a bad practice. I feel like a mistake that I made early in my, I'd say the digital marketing age of marketing automation, call it early 2000s when you first had, early days Eloqua, subsequently, your Marketo's first coming on the scene, your HubSpot on the marketing side coming on the scene, what's that, maybe 15 or more years ago now, going on 20 years. It is, I think we all got fascinated by all the if-then logic in our ability to predict. What's the standard line that kind of makes me gag now? To deliver exactly the right message at exactly the right time.
Yeah.
We're not that good, folks, right? I mean, and the technology isn't that good either. I much prefer the metaphor of a sales cycle of the old shoots and ladders game. You're going up, you're falling back down, buying committees change, budgets change. You go to the top of the ladder and somebody's brother-in-law on the board all of a sudden is working with your competitor. A deal gets blown up for some stupid reason in the last second. You might have a friend of the sister-in-law and you win for some stupid reason. I mean, these deals aren't linear, right? And so you can't predict where you can't predict in a complex enterprise sale where any one person's going to be throughout an entire buyer's journey, let alone multiple people on a buying committee. And it's not just enterprise. I mean, mid-market and SMB, people just don't behave linearly. I may behave linearly with you. Maybe you're great at SEO. No. Let's say you caught my eye with a social post. It was high probability pain point, something cute and clever. You caught my attention. Interesting. I gave it a hover. I gave it a click. For whatever reason, I start getting served more of your stuff. Eventually, I search your company. I'm on your site. I'm navigating. Now all of a sudden, you try feeding me some linear process. Maybe I'm going down this path until I get your price. Guess what I'm going to do now? I'm going to Google who else. I'm going to go to G2. I'm going to go to TrustRadius. I'm going to go to Google. I'm going to go to somebody, and I'm going to start saying, okay, who else does this? Your linear process stopped. I'm back shoots and ladders land, starting another process that's fractionating into 5 different places for those different 5 reps I'm working with. I think the punchline is you have to have your content both served up for sales reps to easily consume and know how to use and leverage at any minute's notice. And you have to have it available in that same way for the buyer to do so anonymously. Because they're not going to, some products that, people listening today that we sell are like commodities that the buyers bought it a million times before. And so maybe a buyer's guide makes a heck of a lot of sense. Some of our products and services are novel. And oh my gosh, I didn't know such a thing existed. I didn't know I needed such a thing. Yes, the farmer in 1880, do I need, if they had Google, they would have Googled, I need, bigger, stronger horses, but what they needed was a tractor. They don't know tractors that existed, right? So some of our solutions are novel and it requires a whole different kind of approach. In either case, you've got to have content, multimodal, that's ebooks, graphics, blogs, videos, etc. By buying stage, by buyer persona, mapping out those high probability pain points so your sales reps can serve it up easily and prospects can self-serve consume this content on their own.
So you've obviously talked a lot about content here. And if you had to put it on a scale, right, in a B2B ABM process, the importance of content in terms of, the importance relative to the overall growth and vitality of your company. 1, it doesn't matter at all. 10, it's vital to the overall growth and vitality of the company. Where would you place it on that scale and why?
No, it's an 11. I mean, if you don't have it over time, the mediums in which we communicate, the platforms in which we communicate to our buyers may change from, less face-and-face now to face-and-face like we're doing here over the interwebs. Social media, website centric, social media centric. in all cases, it's content. And so if I could only choose one thing to do, have a sales rep who, wind back my words, cold calls, with no content to support them, or a website with great content, and I know how to leverage that content and distribute that content and get that content in front of the right people. And all I had was a contact request form. So only bottom of the funnel leads came in. I will choose the latter all day long. So if it's a binary choice, content versus sales only, I'll choose content only all day long. You're leaving money on the table if you chose only one of those options. That's why you should be doing the combination.
I've never heard it quite put that way, which is intriguing, right? Because, content in terms of, I think Forbes put it this way a couple of years ago. It was an article, and the article's title was "Most B2B Content is Crap."
Yeah.
That was the title of this article in Forbes, right? I'm surprised I got approved. But and there's all kinds of studies that talk about, content. There's thought leadership content, there's core marketing, product marketing content. But the content that Forbes also wrote, content marketing solves problems, thought leadership sparks conversations, right? And so I'd love to get your thought just on that line, right? And then the role of thought leadership content, because content's a very large category when you say B2B content, right?
Sure. I had not heard that line before. I love it. It's great. I jumped over into the sales hat for a second. It reminds me a little bit challenger sale, right? Where you need to be a bit provocative to try to get people to think about things differently. So I do like that. I do like that metaphor. It reminds me, and forgive me if I digress a second. I've talked about this before. Just like there's a continuum of hot and cold for how warm your lead is, how much is it aware of who you are, and then what's your reputation, right? So there's that continuum. There's also a continuum of this, going from brand down to lead gen, right? And I see all these forums. I'm sure you see them, Steve. Lead gen is dead. Never make a cold call. And on the other side, it's the opposite. Cold calling still works. I see things that say direct mail still works. All of them are kind of true. They all kind of work. But the story would be if the boy goes to the middle school dance, he's got his best baby blue tux on and Axe body spray and got his whole hair all slicked back. If he's just trying to look his best across the gymnasium floor from all the girls on the other side and hoping one of them comes and asks him to dance, I'd say that's demand gen. He's doing his best. He's looking as dapper as he can. He's trying to stand there and look as cool as he can. He's trying to smell good if they get close to him. And lead gen is walking across the damn floor and asking somebody to dance. And if you ask someone to dance, but you looked and smelled like crap, aka no demand gen, your success chance is going to be much lower.
Yeah.
And so, but if you're going to just sit there and wait for them to come to you and ask you to dance, I mean, it could be a really long wait. Maybe if you're got some serious game and you're really, really smoking hot, maybe you're going to get some people to ask you, but you got to have both. And then removed even further, it's what is brand? Well, brand is either you had a good reputation or a bad reputation, but they knew who you were before you walked into the gymnasium that night, right? And so they all interplay with each other. So within content, is this educational versus provocative? I think you got to go all the way down the continuum from there to case studies, to proof points, to columns and check boxes, lining up how you stack up against your competitor, all the way through their buying journey, right?
So this idea of the need for all of that, right? But, the typical, and we've done 8 different episodes on why do B2B CMOs fail so quickly. And one of the top issues is misalignment between marketing and sales. And typically what happens there is that the CRO or CSO is very focused on short-term sales. They've got a quota they've got to meet, right? They're going to be out of a job pretty quickly if they're not performing. Where
Right.
as a CMO, you want to be very pipeline driven, but you also got to be taking care of the brain, right? And one CMO on the podcast said, three-time B2B CMO, she said, today's brand is tomorrow's demand, right? And we can't look at it as a separate thing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what your thoughts on that are. Like, how connected branding and short-term pipeline development is
Yeah.
to the point when you're in your C-suite meetings or you're meeting with the board, right? And they're all saying, how are we doing on this quarter? How does next quarter quota look, right? And it's very easy for the CSO, CRO, or CEO or the board. That's the number one metric that they're looking at typically.
I would first start out saying there's one more relationship that is far more important to be aligned with than the sales leadership at your marketing, and that's the most senior leadership, your CEO. You can be perfectly aligned with your CSO, but if your boss think you suck, you suck, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lot more important. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be aligned with sales. It's absolutely critical. You have to be. But probably most important, if you're going to be wading into this brand versus demand gen, hey, this is how I want to spend my budget. This is the type of programs I want to put my resources behind. And it's not going to be hand to mouth. My sales partner here is not going to love this, but I need you bought in. Do you agree with me? I mean, that's way more important to have that kind of executive level sponsorship of your programs. So, so I'll say that. Here's what I'd say though, to answer the question more directly. What's more important of the brand? Today's brand is tomorrow's demand. I do love that line. I don't think they have to be different than each other. I mean, clearly, I could create brand only campaigns. I could create a paid social campaign. I could create a paid search campaign. I could create I could outdoor media campaign. There's a million things I could do. Like I could say, I know damn well I'm not going to get good leads from that trade show, but that's one of those shows that it's a who's who and it's a networking show and your absence is conspicuous. So that I'm going to call that brand spend. I mean, there's lots of different ways to rationalize this stuff. Your brand isn't what you say it is and the things that you do. Your brand is what they say it is. And so if your sales team knocks on doors and if they don't represent what you have on your mission, vision, values board, if you say our brand is putting the customer first and somebody walks into the office and they're on their cell phone and they don't make eye contact with you and they act annoyed by the looking up at you, like it's like you're annoying them to be there. Your brand doesn't mean crap. It's the experience with the humans. And so I think whether it is an SDR or a sales rep, an implementation person, a support person, your collections person after the fact, they're all brand ambassadors. And so if your sales team, let's say tip of the spear, like a classic B2B technology, you got an SDR and they're making calls, they're sending emails that look like they came from a different artist's brush and from a different author than my website, than my collateral, than the proposal they're going to get 3 months from now from a sales rep. You've got a brand problem that has nothing to do with brand versus demand gen. You got a brand problem, how you show up. And I think it's a lot. I just don't think they have to be divorced from each other. You can do brand and be hand to mouth demand gen feeding a sales team at the same time.
I'm hearing a very clear trend here, right? Where it can't be just one way or the next, right? It's not brand or, or demand gen. It's not, lead generation. It's not cold versus warm, right? There's a tremendous overlap there. I'm just wondering, the whole podcast here is, myth or truth. Never make a B2B cold call. Like, what haven't we covered Yeah, that you want to make sure that we understand about this myth and this truth of what should we be understanding overall as a takeaway here from never make a B2B cold call.
Yeah. The way I would reframe it, again, I don't like the binary nature of never make a cold call. Because that assumes there's something on the other side of that coin that that is magical and works. And the other side of that coin is a massive continuum of a bazillion things, some of which work better than others. Um, I would encourage folks to think about what is my most effective use of time and money being people too, with my most effective use of time and money, and go all in on that one thing. Because it's a lot easier to be aligned on, say, one massive campaign that has one, say, set of content. Maybe it has, here's my set of ads, here's my social posts, here's at least the themes and the graphics that I'll use. Here's my landing page or 4 pages. Here's the email series. You get everybody grounded on this, and there's a marketing component, there's a content component, there's a sales component, there's an SDR component, there's a account management component. And let's just go all in on that until you start seeing diminishing returns. And then maybe have some experiments running off to the side, and then go after the next vein of gold, if you will, and mine that vein until it runs out. I think it's a mistake to try to get too scattered. Like, I need a little of this, I need a little of that. There's nothing wrong with the marketing mix, tried and true concept for many decades. But I think it's a mistake to start with, I have to have the right marketing mix. I mean, failure rate of tech startups is really freaking high, and or have success. And so have enough experiments going that you can find those veins of gold. But when you find gold, go all in and tap that mother out, right? And then incrementally add these other things. Eventually, when you get big enough, then, a multi-million-dollar Super Bowl ad that moves the needle 0.25%, but that 0.25% means 50 million to you. All of a sudden, that marketing mix now starts to make a lot of sense. And there's a lot more brand versus demand gen versus lead gen kind of decision making. But I'd say early on, get sales and marketing completely on the same page, pick one thing, go deep, and just incrementally grow from there as you start to have diminishing returns on a campaign.
I love that. I'm gonna take a dramatic shift to the right
Okay.
and ask you about something that Gartner has come out with, McKinsey has come out with, and it has to do with the competitive advantage that we all have as companies today. And what is the number one competitive advantage? And the point of view that they're coming out with is that in a day and age of rapid technological innovation and ChatGPT writing code, that it used to be that product was a major point of difference that is no longer there, right?
Yeah.
That even if you come out with a platform or a feature or something, it's going to be rapidly, iterated on and innovated on by your
Right.
competitors. And you have 20, 30 different competitors these days. And so even competing on price, we don't want to be the low cost leader, right? So like the bastions of long-term competitive advantage around product and price are no longer the number one points of view. Their point of view is that the number one competitive advantage and the key to long-term sustained value, from stakeholder value on down, is customer experience, CX.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought you having been significantly on the marketing and the sales side, I'd love to hear your perspective on that. And what do you think about today's number one competitive advantage being customer experience?
I couldn't agree more. I think customer experience is the number one competitive advantage. Some companies that have high barriers to entry, maybe it's really intensive capital requirements. Maybe there's an unbelievable amount of expertise. You can exploit those opportunities and have a crappy product, a crappy user experience, but because you're so niche or the barriers to entry are so high that you can have success for a while. But long term, you're going to get, if you're technology, you're going to get 80, 90 due to AI, and somebody's going to come up with 80% of that value with a 90% discount, and you're going to get crushed, which means the only differentiate. Maybe you can put in a spreadsheet to prove that you're not a commodity, but from the buyer's perspective, you're kind of a commodity. And then all you've got left is customer experience.
Right.
And this is where I kind of go where I just left off before. The customer experience doesn't start when they sign a contract. The customer experience starts with the very first brand impression.
Yes.
Right. It could have been an organic social post. And so is your organic social post talking about the high probability pain points that you solve for clients? Or is it a picture of the dog at the company picnic? And I'm not saying that's the bad thing, because there could be great brand exposure. There's a lot of really good reasons for dogs at picnics in social media. But if you're setting the right expectation with prospects at the first contact, whether it's website or social or search, whatever, or a cold call from an SDR or a sales rep, in how they show up to that call, the words that they use, the questions they ask, and how that carries all the way through a quoting process, through an implementation process, through a support process, through a collections, how do you pay your bill process? All that counts, right? And the more integrated and seamless it is, that in and of itself becomes a competitive advantage. The company I work for now, Asure, we have enterprise clients. We have about 100,000 small business clients. And I mean, your job for small businesses is to make their life as easy as possible. Small business owners are running around with their hair on fire. They're working their faces off. They just need things to simply work and be easy. And don't make this too hard for me, right? Don't make me log into too many things. Don't make me log a ticket. You should tell me when there's a problem. I shouldn't have to tell you. And things that aren't necessarily the product per se. It's how you engage and interact with that client through the entire relationship. Every invoice you send, every contract, every email you send, and of course they log in and the screens that they see. It's all the product.
Yeah. In fact, to your point, I had another CRO tell me, he said, look, if it's really tough just to go through like the onboarding process with us, yet we've promised all of this incredible, outcomes, right? That destroys our brand. That destroys what we've built, right?
Yeah.
Because at every point, it has to be easy to work with us. In fact, a chief security officer said, just had gone through a procurement process on a part of their tech stack. And he said, looked at 14 different companies. And he said, you know what? All they wanted to know was one thing. That one thing was, on the other side, how easy is it going to be to work with you guys? Because everybody checked the box, right? Nobody came in and said, for all 10 things that you need, our tech platform, we only really do 6 or 7 of those, right? They all say we check all the boxes. Right. And if they don't really, they're working on it really hard, right? So the bottom line is, what's the experience going to be like working with them? Makes just innate perfect sense. That's what we need to know. We've all hired the right person or the right company, we thought, but the experience of working with them was a nightmare. And so, Mike, if there was literally one thing that you wanted people to take away from our episode here today, the most important thing, what would that be?
I'd say the most important thing you can do as a marketer is to have a content strategy that aligns to the buying journey and the buyer personas involved in that purchase process. And from there, depending on how complex the size and complexity of your organization, don't try running some old playbook where here's what marketing does to generate leads, and you flip it over to sales, and your leads. Here's my MQLs. Well, your MQLs suck. that's where this whole thing about sales and marketing alignment come in. I think marketing has to serve content up. It has to serve leads up. It has to serve content and intent, context and intent up. Um, instead of being football field where you have offense or defense on the field at the same time, it's a lot more like soccer. You're both in the field at the same time. The ball's going forward, it's going backward, and you're all kind of moving together. You each have your role, but you're really working together. And then maybe the last thing would be just pick one thing, go all in on that until you start getting diminishing returns before you just keep adding on.
I love it. Thank you, Mike. I mean, I'm pretty sure we're going to have some people that have questions afterwards. And would it be appropriate if we gave out a link to your LinkedIn profile so that people had a way to get a hold of you?
Oh, good. Yeah, no worries.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for coming on and sharing with us today. I just really appreciate all the insights and keeping us thinking. We always have to be thinking. And one of my biggest takeaways from here is that content and the 11 out of 10 that you talked about here, that really is the lubricant that kind of makes everything work.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
All right. Well,
you can keep on emailing people, hey, you want to buy from me. But an email campaign is a lot more effective if you actually have some value to share, and that looks an awful lot like content. So yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Mike, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Dean. Good talk to you.